The night one woman changed everything. Picture this, a sealed room in the U.S. Capitol. Party leaders sitting behind locked doors, licking their wounds after a devastating election loss. The air thick with desperation and bruised egos. And in the back corner, one woman who's about to risk everything to confront not her enemies, but her own side. This is the story of Jasmine Crockett, and the night she reminded America what courage actually looks like. The setup. The Democratic Party had just been crushed in the midterms. Safe seats turned red. Young voters stayed home. The party's highest-ranking leaders gathered in a windowless room deep within Capitol Hill, faces grim, ties loosened, desperately searching for answers. At the center stood Hakeem Jeffries, projecting a map of their losses lit in digital scarlet. His solution? Simple. The way forward is moderation, he announced. We recalibrate. We unify around a centrist message to win back independence. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. To some, it sounded like strategy. To others, like surrender. In the back row, deliberately separated from the inner circle, sat Jasmine Crockett. She hadn't spoken, not a word. But her silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. Her tailored black blazer hugged her shoulders like armor. Her eyes locked on Jeffries with a quiet fury that dared anyone to mistake her for passive. No one in that room had fought harder on the ground, defending the party's principles under fire on national television, risking her own safety in the name of truth. And now she was watching those same principles get traded for comfort. The betrayal. Then Jeffries stepped forward with his master plan. 3 words appeared on the projector: new message discipline. We shift the narrative, he continued with practiced calm. We reduce emphasis on race-based injustices. We step back from the gender wars, from LGBTQ plus culture flashpoints. These are valid concerns, but they've become noise to the voters we're losing. The strategy was crystal clear. Repackage the party for comfort. Not for the people struggling to breathe, but for those who had the luxury to be uncomfortable. Around the table, older lawmakers exhaled relief like they'd been underwater and were finally coming up for air. This might actually save us, one veteran congressman whispered. Another mumbled, it's time we stopped fighting every cultural battle. But Jasmine had knocked on doors in neighborhoods where rainbow flags were ripped from porches. She'd seen the eyes of children learning their identities made them political liabilities. She'd been in rooms when mothers asked, will they jail my son for the color of his skin? She reached into her worn black folio, not the glossy one from caucus retreats, but the one she carried from courtroom to campaign trail. Her fingers found a blank page. The pen clicked once, twice, as she began to write. Not notes. Preparation. Resistance in ink. The confrontation. Then she said it. No crescendo, no raised fist. Just the cold clarity of someone who had no more patience for polished betrayals. And who exactly represents our conscience while you're busy chasing what's palatable? The room reacted as if someone had cracked the marble beneath their feet. Heads turned sharply. An aide dropped a pen. The silence that followed made men fidget and reputations sweat. Jasmine rose slowly, deliberately, like a prosecutor approaching the witness stand. Her heels echoed on the polished floor like a countdown. She stopped directly across from Jeffries, and the distance between them became the axis of everything left unspoken. Are you protecting the voters? She asked, her voice slicing the room in half. Or just protecting your seat? Jeffries straightened, his voice low and deliberate when he finally responded. I lead this entire party, not just one community. The words dropped like cold iron. The insult was clear. She was being reduced not for what she said, but for who she dared to represent. The room went still, witnesses to a hit they weren't brave enough to call out. But Jasmine wasn't finished. If Jeffries had drawn a line, she was about to set it on fire. The receipts. You voted in favor, she said, her tone sharper than any shout. You backed the 2021 surveillance bill that disproportionately targeted Black communities. You called it necessary oversight. Was that leadership, too? The room recoiled. That bill had authorized expanded surveillance partnerships that flooded predominantly black neighborhoods with facial recognition vans and predictive policing models that treated poverty like a crime pattern. Jasmine reached for her tablet. With a single tap, the wall screen behind Jeffries blinked to life. Old congressional hearing footage appeared. Jeffries seated comfortably before an oversight committee, wearing his practiced smile. A reporter's voice filled the room. "Congressman Jeffries, can you confirm whether your campaign has received bundled contributions from tech firms currently bidding on federal surveillance contracts?" Jeffries leaned forward, hands folded. "Our campaign complies with all federal election rules. We receive support from a wide array of concerned citizens who believe in responsible governance." He smiled as he said it, calculated, rehearsed, dodging while pretending to answer. Muted, the video was even more damning. The evasive posture, the rehearsed grin, the total absence of accountability. No one dared speak. The weight of truth was too loud. The breaking point. Then something unexpected happened. A younger congressman, mid-30s, newly elected, still carrying idealism in his eyes, rose from his seat without a word. He collected his folder with trembling hands and walked toward the door. The click of his shoes sounded louder than anything said that night. When the door closed behind him, the echo was like a verdict. Not rebellion, disillusionment. The room didn't explode, fractured. But Jasmine wasn't done. She pulled out a thick binder, heavy with months of ground truth. When she set it on the center of the table, the sharp thump demanded attention, respect, and maybe an apology. 300 battleground districts, she said, flipping through pages of data. Voter turnout, youth engagement, digital response rates. You want to know the common thread. Her finger tapped a page where bar graph columns surged with progressive messaging. The only message that moved the needle was the one we keep apologizing for. Truth, justice, the kind that doesn't dilute itself to sound moderate. She stepped back, lifting her chin to look everyone directly in the eye. We didn't lose because we were too progressive. We lost because we were too forgettable. The human cost. Then came the moment that changed everything. Jasmine reached into her folio and pulled out a letter. Folded twice, edges slightly frayed, handwriting visible from across the room. No letterhead, no logo, just ink and heartbreak. She unfolded it with quiet intention and read aloud. "We lost our son because of an inhumane immigration policy. He was deported after a traffic stop. 2 months later, we were told he died in a detention cell in Mexico. We didn't even know he was sick. We didn't know who to call. We didn't know who cared, who was standing for us." The words didn't echo. They sank slowly, like lead into still water. The silence that followed wasn't political, it was human. An aide wiped her cheek. A congresswoman covered her mouth. In the back corner, a seasoned strategist looked down as a single tear fell onto his notes. These weren't dramatics. These were people remembering what feeling sounded like. Jasmine folded the letter with the same care she'd opened it, placing it gently on the table like a marker stone on sacred ground. She hadn't told them about a poll. She had told them about a coffin. And that changed everything. The vote. From the second row, a young congressman's voice broke through the silence. "I think we need to vote. Not a show of hands," he continued, "but a real vote. Secret ballot. One question. Do we keep the path we've been walking, or do we change it?" What followed was sacrilege to the old guard. And used voting slips were grabbed. A box was emptied and repurposed. One by one, ballots were filled out, folded, dropped in. Democracy re-entered a room that had too long run on inertia. When the final slip was submitted, 3 neutral staffers began the count. The room was deadly still, the kind of stillness that only exists when people realize the moment they're in is bigger than themselves. Then came the result. 54% support the proposed change in direction. It hit like an earthquake. Silent but staggering. No applause, no cries of victory, only impact. Deep, irreversible impact. Jeffries didn't speak. He simply reached down, unclipped the silver leadership badge from his lapel, and placed it gently on the table. The sound was barely audible, barely more than a click of metal on wood. but to those in the room it was deafening. He stood up slowly and walked past them all without a word, his footsteps echoing like the retreating beat of a fading drum. Just like that, he was gone. The aftermath. Outside, journalists still waited in the hallway, unaware that history had just been made behind those doors. Inside, Jasmine remained seated, her eyes drifting to her notebook where she'd written one sentence hours before the meeting. "If I don't speak today, there won't be a tomorrow." She whispered it under her breath like a prayer. The room was hers now, and with that came something heavier than opposition: expectation. 1 week later, she walked into a national television studio. No script, no teleprompter, just her and a camera. When the red light went on, she began. "There's a lot of talk about new parties, about walking away, about burning it all down. But I want to say something as clearly as I can. We don't need a new party. We need a new soul for this one." She pulled out that same folded paper and read her original sentence aloud. "If I don't speak today, there won't be a tomorrow." Then came the line that would travel farther than she ever imagined. "I didn't break the Democratic Party. I reminded it why it was born. The movement." Within hours, the clip hit 7 million views. Within 24 hours, it was translated into 5 languages by volunteers. She didn't ask for money, didn't launch a campaign. She'd simply spoken truth without trying to own anyone. Across the country, people awakened. In Phoenix, immigrant-owned shops couldn't keep up with orders for shirts bearing her quote. In Birmingham, candidates changed their stump speeches. In Detroit, volunteers launched community newsletters. A mural appeared in Los Angeles showing Jasmine alone at that long table with the words, "I reminded it why it was born." The woman they'd accused of dividing the party had somehow begun unifying a generation. The lesson, but the most powerful lesson, wasn't about politics. It was about courage. Real courage never feels like triumph. It feels like risk, like isolation, like being the only one left standing when the applause dies. When Jasmine sat alone in that conference room after everyone left, what she felt wasn't victory. It was responsibility. She'd started something that couldn't be spun or walked back, and now she had to live inside it. That's what people forget when they demand moral clarity from others. They forget the cost. Speaking up isn't rewarded in real time. It's punished. But sometimes, when power forgets its purpose, it's not just your right but your duty to remind it. Jasmine didn't ask for applause. She asked for courage. The kind that shows up where it matters. In precincts, boardrooms, voting booths, the quiet places where policy becomes pain. Her final message wasn't to politicians. It was to anyone who'd ever asked why nothing changes. Don't wait for someone to speak for you. Show up. Challenge the platforms. Walk into the offices. And when they say you're too loud, too angry, too bold, don't flinch. Say you learned from Jasmine Crockett. You're not breaking anything. You're just reminding them who they promised to be. The truth, no matter how powerfully spoken, means nothing if it's not carried. Jasmine lit the match. Now it's our turn to carry the fire.